Welcome to Positive Perspectives, a podcast dedicated to sharing powerful stories that presents opportunities to grow from lived experiences. Each week, we speak to experts, guests who bring thought-provoking topics, meaningful lessons, or stories that spark transformation and deepen understanding. Today, I'm joined by Usha Kong, an award-winning changemaker, speaker, and passionate advocate for social mobility and inclusion. Her journey from facing hardship and domestic abuse to leading impactful change through education, leadership, and equality is nothing short of inspirational. Today, she shares a deeply personal story of resilience with a message of hope and purpose for anyone who's feeling stuck or they've never been listened to or underestimated. Usha, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a bit more about the story that you're going to be sharing today and about yourself as well?
So, as you introduced me, I am a resilience coach and a social mobility strategist. And earlier this year, I co-founded a social enterprise called Loney Futures. The social enterprise is about helping to bridge the gap between education and opportunity for young people, and it's across England. And it's been something that I'm very close to my heart, something that I feel is important and is required and is needed. And it's really built from my lived experience, from a need and a purpose for not having the support I needed when I was younger.
Thank you, Usha. That's a great message. That's a message of hope and purpose. So when people are feeling stuck, this how they can actually change their present and probably rewrite their future as well.
Absolutely. So what I would like to do is talk through how I got to where I am today and why Novi Futures is so important to me and what the underlying messages around that and why I do the keynote speaking and why that career is important as well and the messages I bring through that to empower others.
Thank you. Can you tell us what you will be calling your story?
Rise, reclaiming power from pain.
Let's hear your story.
As a family, we came into the UK in the 70s and I was just under 5 years old. Parents didn't speak much English or didn't speak English at all, but my father had a job in a factory, so we came to join him. Sadly, my childhood was very unhappy because my father had lots of pressures in supporting not only the family he had with him, us, but also a family back home in India. In those days, when people left home countries and went abroad, they had duties and responsibilities to take care of family back home. So my dad had a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and to be able to do that on a very small factory wage was very difficult. So our home life was filled with lots of stress, anxiety, anger, and fear. And my father followed that through in the way we were brought up. And then this was not always seen from the outside, but it was the kind of the silence that silenced dreams. So all of our hopes and our desires were limited because of the life that we had at home. For me, school was my sanctuary. It gave me hope. It was fun, and there was lots of what I thought possibilities. So I hated school holidays, and I longed to return to school. A little bit odd, I suppose, for my friends, but it was where I found my happy place. And I had a dream. I wanted to become a lawyer. So I researched law schools, mapped out my routes, but it wasn't meant to be. For my father, the fear of his children, particularly girls, in a country that he didn't understand, was too much for him. And for him, it was important that we were culturally in a position to get married and be accepted. So it was important that we were ready to get married and get married very quickly. So I got married at 16. And during the time that I was finishing my school, home life was very turbulent and I struggled to study. So I failed all my exams. So home wasn't somewhere that was peaceful, where you could focus on your education. So I actually left school without any qualifications. And then having got married, the expectation was that I would go out to work. And because I had studied in this country, my husband thought and wanted me to get a job in an office, which I did. I was fortunate to be able to get an office job, but with no qualifications and only being 16, my dreams of studying and going to law school were shattered. But it meant I started at the bottom of the ranks in an office, so as a typist. But nothing prepared me for the culture shock. I had a very sheltered upbringing. So I didn't know what everyone else did outside of our community. So I lived within our community. Now I was working alongside people whose lives looked nothing like mine. Their freedom, their choices, the way they spoke, they moved through the world, it was completely different. I was living in two worlds and they couldn't have been further apart, and I struggled. The office world, where I was expected to perform, and the home world, where silence, duty, and survival was everything. So I was struggling between the two worlds, and I didn't fit in neatly into either of them. I had no qualifications, no shared experiences, and no real understanding of where I belonged. So I carried sadness about what I didn't have and what I hadn't become. And unfortunately, my marriage mirrored my mother's. So years of suffering in silence and years of trying to make it work until I found the courage to leave. So for me, the turning point was when I left with my two young children, and they were just 6 and 3. And only days later, I became a widow. Family and community support disappeared because of how I left and what followed. So I was alone. But I was clear about one thing. I wasn't going to give up my children and myself. And I decided that my job would be my route out of poverty and that I would use that to build our future. So there is a saying that education is the route out of poverty. And I do believe that is the case. But education alone isn't what allows you to do that. You need to find another way. And the other way is the job. Even though I was at the bottom of the rank, having a job in an office, I felt would allow me to work my way up through determination to allow me to get further up that ladder and actually secure something better for me and the children. But what I didn't have was any mentoring. So I had no mentors. I didn't have a roadmap. Just a fierce determination that I was going to survive, that I wouldn't let this be the end of our story, but the beginning of something new. And that is when I looked and I sort of developed what I call now the RISE framework. The framework is not something that came out of a workshop. It's more of lived moments, small, quiet acts of resistance that help me move forward. So if we look at that framework, we look at the word resilience. Resilience was finding the strength to stand again when life and everything around me was broken. Getting out of bed every morning when grief sat heavy on my chest. It was going to work, smiling when I was broken or when I was breaking inside. It was making sure my children never went without, even if that meant I did. Identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't fit in at home. I didn't fit in at work. But what was important was owning who I am. So trying to find my story, identifying my roots and my truth, and becoming authentic with that and believing that that was who I was and building up from that. So slowly, I stopped asking people what they expected of me and what they expected me to be. And I started asking, who did I want to become? What did I want my children to see me as? And I used that as a way of developing myself and confirming my identity. Self-worth. I always used to ask whether I was enough. And what I learned over the years is you are enough. I always have been, and I always will be. And I will never shrink to fit into spaces too small for who I am. Now, I didn't have qualifications or accolades, but I had impact. And I began to see that I wasn't less than, and I just hadn't had the same start as others. And that didn't make me any less worthy of success. And now I'm a multi-award winning advocate for social mobility. So over time, once you believe in yourself and you trust yourself, those things will follow. And empowerment, the RISE framework ends with empowerment. Really important, lifting others as you rise, because we're stronger when we work together. I began to use my story as I am today, and not to see it as a weakness, but as a tool. For such a long time, I thought my story was negative, that it was a weakness, but I realized I could use it to help others, to connect, to inspire, and to build change. So I started to create spaces for others to rise to. And now, this year, I've led and developed and set up Novi Futures and my speaking work. And everything I do now is about raising the profile around my work, but also to speak about my journey and why that's important. So Novi Futures is a social enterprise focused on bridging the gap between education and opportunities for young people. It's about creating and increasing social and cultural capital and improving social mobility, but learning from lived experience and using a holistic community approach, providing opportunities that I didn't have, providing mentorship, access to networks, and letting young people see opportunities that wouldn't normally be there unless someone opened those doors for them, meeting role models, and showing them that through education and connections and networks, that they can be whatever they want to be, that they will never be alone. There'll always be support around them. And for me, that's really important.
Mm.
So anyone that listens and feels that they've messed up, or if they feel like they don't belong, or they're carrying shame for things that were out of their control, like I once did, please know that you're not broken. You are just becoming. Your past doesn't disqualify you, but it equips you. Rise isn't about having it all figured out. It's about rising even when it's messy, and you don't have to rise alone.
That's really powerful, incredibly powerful story, and quite moving as well. So, what moment did you realize that you could rewrite the end of your journey?
I think it would have to be when I left my marriage. Obviously, I was 24 years old and I had two children who were 3 and 6 at the time. You know, you look at them and you think, if you continue and you stay in the life that I was in at the time, they would think that this is normal, abuse is normal, that my daughter would think that silence is strength, and my son would think that control is love. And that isn't what I wanted them to learn and believe in. So it's important for me to do something about it. So leaving was terrifying, but it was the right thing to have done.
Mm.
And at that point, I knew that I had to take control of rewriting our journey going forward. And obviously, at that same point, I was widowed. My late husband, took actions into his own hands, which left me to move forward with my children and do what I thought was right for us. So I didn't know the way forward, but I knew the ending wasn't written yet, and I had the power to change that.
Thank you for talking us through the pillars and how connected to the journey your framework is. How did you build resilience during the most challenging times of your life?
Resilience wasn't natural. I mean, I was a scared little girl, always feared authority and still do to a certain degree. And I think it's ingrained in me, and it takes time for me to understand that I don't have to accept when people don't behave appropriately. So it's built in small daily choices. So in the early days, yes, it was small steps. getting up when I didn't want to, holding it together at work when I was falling apart inside, choosing not to give up, even when I had no roadmap, no support, no qualifications. Remember, I came from a very small community and had a very sheltered life. So everything outside of that was new to me, and I was learning every single day. So resilience grew stronger every time I kept going, despite the fear. And everything was fear around me. So it wasn't about bouncing back, it was about building a new foundation from broken pieces. And my whole life has been built around fear and uncertainty. So, but one thing I would say was I was never truly alone, though in many ways I was. And the reason I say that was my children, though only 6 and 3, they were my purpose. They became the reason I got up every morning and kept going. They probably never knew what they were doing at the time, but they fueled me. They gave me the courage, the strength to keep going, to make life better for us, and to keep picking myself up and dusting myself off and just keep going. I don't think I'd be here today or be the person I am today. So I'd say really resilience comes from knowing I couldn't give up,
Yeah.
because giving up meant giving up my children's future.
Yeah. There seemed to be a stronger cause, a stronger purpose for giving your children a better way of life than you had had, and showing them better examples of how to live life as well. So, what message can you give someone who is feeling a bit stuck right now, a bit unsure about their circumstances or how to rise?
I tell them, you're not broken. You are becoming. Even in the struggle, you are still growing, shaping, building your future self. You can't always control what happens, but you can choose what happens next.
Mm.
And take one step, claim one choice. It doesn't have to be a giant leap, just a step forward. And remember, rising isn't about doing it alone. Find someone, even one person, who believes in you. And there will be more than one, but just find that one person. And the story you've been handed is not the story you have to live.
Mm.
Every struggle is shaping who you are becoming, and you can rise even from the hardest places.
Thank you. People can rise, and they do rise from the hardest places, and probably takes other people, as in your case, to show them that they are strong enough to do that, give them that kind of motivation to actually do that. So, what one positive takeaway can you leave with our audience today?
I believe in all of those things that we talk about in the RISE framework, which is, resilience gives us the courage to keep moving. So keep moving, keep going.
Mhm.
Identify and remind yourself that you are enough, and ground yourself in knowing that you're enough. So remember your self-worth. And the last thing is the empowerment. As you're pushing yourself, make space for others and push them along the way. So I really think it's important that you believe in yourself and trust yourself and help others along the way.
Thank you so much, Usha. Such an authentic and vulnerable story, illustrating how to rise with resilience and reclaim your voice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Marie. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story.